ito ang 106.3 Dance Radio. Dance Radio.
Prepare yourself.
Ang silid-aralan sa radyo, hatid namin ay makabagong paraan ng pagtuturo at kalaman. Mapaumaga, tanghali o hapon man yan, ang istasyong magbibigay impormasyon kahit saan man.
For something big. Alright, here we go.
106.3 Dance Radio. Doña Aurora National High School, Santa Rita, Aurora, Isabela.
This
106.3 DWDR-FM. Physics, Chemistry, Earth Science, Biology, Biochemistry, Environmental Science. These are some branches of science. Science is about a whole lot more than that. And to sum it up, we believe that science is the way of helping the brain grow in finding new knowledge and help us defeat our curiosity and how the world develops and works today. Science. This is your class, and this is science. And now, here is your host for the day.
Okay. Naririnig po ba ako? Ayan, a blessed morning to all viewers and listeners, especially to our grade 8 learners. Okay, again, welcome to our class in Science 8. So, this is the last week, di ba, Ma'am Lynn and Ma'am Rosel and Sir Ryan. Ayan, last week na po ng Shift 1, 4th quarter.
That's right, Ma'am Rio. So before we start our session, I just want to greet our officer in charge, Ma'am Ofelia Ezra Lutin, and also to all head teachers of the different learning area, teaching and non-teaching personnel. A blessed Monday morning to everyone. At lalo na din sa ating mga learners, welcome back to school. Nandito man kayo face-to-face classes or modular. So, Sir Ryan, what do we expect in our discussion this morning?
Okay, yes, Ma'am Rosel. So for this week's lesson, we will discuss about the Mendelian Genetics with the learning competency predict phenotypic expressions of traits following simple patterns of inheritance, and with the specific objectives, describe the Mendelian Genetics principle of inheritance by analyzing Mendel's experiment. And second, solve and predict Mendelian phenotypic and genotypic expression of traits in a monohybrid cross.
Wow! So it looks so interesting, Sir Ryan. So to all our viewers and listeners, hold on until the end of our session. So what are we waiting for? Get your learning activity sheets, pen and paper, and here's now your RBI lesson. Enjoy listening and have fun!
Dance Radio, silid-aralan sa radyo, hatid namin makabago, paraan ang pagtuturo.
Wala nang makakapigil pa. Sulong Arangkada 106.3 Dance Radio sa Aurora, Isabela.
Edukasyo'y susulong, basta't magtulong-tulong, sulong edukalidad. Dance Radio, learning is amazing.
Physics, Chemistry, Earth Science, Biology, Biochemistry, Environmental Science. These are some branches of science. Science is about a whole lot more than that. And to sum it up, we believe that science is a way of helping the brain grow in finding new knowledge and help us defeat our curiosity of how the world develops and works today. Science, science, science. This is your class, and this is science. And now, Here is your host for the day. Good day, our dear listeners, especially our dear new normal learners of grade 8. This is your school on the air in science. We are glad because you are with us in our alternative delivery mode of education through the use of this radio-based instruction. It is a great privilege that you can join us in fun learning through radio. I am teacher Dennis Mendoza, your host for today's episode, together with teacher Riza and Marsan, our technical specialist. You are listening to School on the Air, DWDR-FM 106.3 Dance Radio, where learning is amazing. I know you are excited as I am, so get ready, grade 8 learners. At this point, please get your learning activity sheets on Mendelian Genetics, your pen and notebook. Always remember to take down important concepts from our lesson today. I hope you are all set and ready to listen. This time, I turn you over to our radio teacher in science, Teacher Riofei Magaway.
Wonderful day, our dear grade 8 learners. I am teacher Riofei Magaway, your radio teacher in science, and I'm with you until we finish our lesson on Mendelian Genetics. Are you ready to start our lesson for today?
Yes, ma'am.
In your previous lesson, you learned about meiosis. So what is meiosis?
Ma'am, meiosis is a type of cell division that takes place during the creation of sex cells.
That's right. What happens during meiosis?
During meiosis, the chromosome number is decreased by half. This is to ensure that the zygote would receive the exact number of chromosomes during the fertilization, ma'am.
Very good. What do you call the creation of germ cells or gametes?
The creation of germ cells or gametes is referred to as gametogenesis. These gametes are used for sexual reproduction, ma'am.
Wonderful answer. Do you know the basic function of meiosis?
The basic function of meiosis is to maintain the standard number of chromosomes of the organism or species after the union of sex cells during fertilization, ma'am.
Great! You learned a lot in our previous lesson. After going through this module, you are expected to discuss Mendelian genetics, solve and predict Mendelian phenotypic and genotypic expression of traits in a monohybrid cross, and predict phenotypic expressions of traits following simple patterns of inheritance. Did someone told you that your eyes and your ears look the same as your mother, and your skin complexion and your height are the same with your father? How did this happen? Do you have any idea?
None, ma'am.
In this lesson, you will understand how traits are passed from one generation to the next. Why do you think Gregor Mendel had chosen garden peas or Pisum sativum in investigating how individual traits were inherited?
Gregor Mendel chose the garden peas Pisum sativum in his experiments because it has several traits to be studied, easy to grow, and reproduce through self-pollination, ma'am.
Well said, my dear. Through this research on garden peas, a new branch of science was formed. It is called genetics. What is genetics?
Genetics is the study of heredity and the factors that affect the transmission of genes to determine inherited characters from one generation to the next, ma'am.
Very good answer. If genetics is the study of heredity and the factors that affect the transmission of genes, how about heredity?
Heredity refers to the transfer of trait genes from the parents to offspring, ma'am.
Great! Do you know what traits are? Can you give examples?
Traits are distinguishing quality or characteristic usually belonging to a person. Some examples of traits are hair color, dimples, eye color, attached earlobes, skin color, and many more, teacher.
What a wonderful answer! Traits are passed down in families in different patterns. Pedigrees can illustrate these patterns by following the history of specific characteristics as they appear in a family. We have two types of traits, dominant and recessive. Before Mendel's experiments, most people believed that traits in offspring resulted from a blending of the traits of each parent. However, when Mendel cross-pollinated one variety of purebred plant with another, these crosses would yield offspring that looked like either one of the parent plants, not a blend of the two. Will you describe the seeds of pea plants that Mendel crossed?
Mendel cross-fertilized plants with wrinkled seeds to those with smooth seeds, ma'am.
Very good. Can you describe what resulted from the cross between purebred, or in modern terminology, homozygous wrinkled and homozygous round seeds?
He did not get offspring with semi-wrinkly seeds, ma'am. Instead, the offspring from this cross had only smooth seeds.
Very good. In general, if the offspring of crosses between purebred plants looked like only one of the parents with regard to a specific trait, Mendel called the expressed parental trait the dominant trait. He found that round was consistently 3 times more frequent than wrinkle. This 3:1 proportion of the round versus wrinkled seeds resulting from first filial generation crosses suggested that there was a hidden recessive form of the trait. Mendel recognized that this recessive trait was carried down to the second filial generation from the earlier parental generation. The two pure breeding parental generations involved in a particular cross are designated as parental 1 and parental 2. What about the offspring resulting from the crossing?
The resulting offspring are designated as the filial or F1 generation, ma'am.
You are correct, my dear. How did Mendel produce the pure breeding plants?
Gregor Mendel first produced pure breeding plants through self-pollination for many generations, until all the offspring had the same features as the parents. He called it as the parental or P1 generation. Second step, using his pure breeding plants, he started cross-pollinating the peas with contrasting traits. He called it as first filial generation.
Very good. A cross using one trait is referred as monohybrid. The first filial generation was also called hybrids because it resulted from a cross between two purebred plants with different traits. Kindly open your learning activity sheets on page 3. Look at figure 3, monohybrid cross. What are the traits cross-pollinated by Gregor Mendel, and how will you describe the offspring again?
Ma'am, Gregor Mendel cross-pollinated garden peas using pure-breed round seed and pure-breed wrinkled seed peas. Offspring are all round seeds.
Precisely. This time, look at table 1 on the same page of your learning activity sheet. You have results of Mendel's crosses between pure breed peas.
How will you describe the 7 traits of the garden peas in the offspring after Gregor Mendel crosses purebred peas?
Let me first describe the table, ma'am. The table has 3 columns. The first column is for traits, second column is for parents, and the last column is for first filial generation. For flower position, when axial, which is dominant, cross-pollinated with terminal, which is recessive, the offspring are all axial, ma'am.
Very good. For pod color, when yellow, which is dominant, cross-pollinated with green, which is recessive, the offspring are all yellow. What about for the pod shape and seed coat?
For pod shape, when inflated pod which is dominant cross-pollinated with constricted pod which is recessive, the offspring are all inflated. For seed coat color, when the colored which is dominant cross-pollinated with white which is recessive, the offspring are all colored, ma'am.
Precisely. For seed color, when yellow, which is dominant, cross-pollinated with green, which is recessive, the offspring are all yellow. What about the seed shape and length?
For seed shape, when round which is dominant cross-pollinated with wrinkled which is recessive, the offspring are all round. For the stem, when long which is dominant cross-pollinated with short which is recessive, the offspring are all long, ma'am.
Very comprehensive answer. All of the offspring possessed the dominant traits. But Gregor Mendel did not stop here. Do you know the reason why Gregor Mendel did not stop cross-pollinating pure breeds with contrasting traits?
Ma'am, Gregor Mendel did not stop cross-pollinating the plants on pure breeds with contrasting traits because he was determined to know what happened with the other lost traits. The lost traits that he referred to are the terminal flower position, the yellow pod color, the constricted pod shape, the white seed coat color, the green seed color, the wrinkled seed shape, and the short stem length.
Impressive! So, what did Gregor Mendel do to answer his query?
Ma'am, in order to answer his query, he cross-pollinated the hybrids by themselves.
Precisely. Open your learning activity sheets on page 4. Refer to figure 4, self-pollination of hybrids. The offspring from cross-pollinating hybrids is called second filial generation. What did Mendel observe after cross-pollinating the hybrids?
Ma'am, in the F2 generation, Mendel observed that the number of round seeds and wrinkled seeds were not equal and in all the traits he studied.
Great answer! You are very keen observer. Based from Mendel's observation, he concluded that the first filial generation received the capabilities to produce both physical characteristics or phenotypes from their parents, which are retained and passed on to their future offspring. Gregor Mendel's results of his experiment made him hypothesize that there was a factor in the plants which controlled the appearance of a trait, which he called heredity or factors. He also hypothesized that traits were regulated by a pair of factors now called alleles. With these findings, Gregor Mendel was able to formulate the 3 principles of heredity. Can you describe what is allele?
Ma'am, allele is one of a pair of genes that appear at a particular location on a particular chromosome and control the same characteristics like blood type and color blindness.
Absolutely correct. On the other hand, a gene is the basic physical unit of inheritance that is passed from parents to offspring and contain the information needed to specific traits. We will be right back after a few reminders to discuss the Mendelian principles of heredity.
Amazing tips sa pag-aaral ngayong new normal.
Una, matulog sa tamang oras. Siguraduhin mula 7 hanggang 8 oras ang iyong pagtulog.
Sapat na iyan upang gumana ng maayos ang utak upang makapag-isip. Siguradong good day ka, kaibigan.
Ikalawa, magtala o gumawa ng sariling schedule. Mahalaga ang time management, kaibigan.
Itala ang mga subject na kinakailangan mong pag-aralan sa buong araw. Maglaan ng oras para sa mga ito.
Ikatlo, pumili ng lugar sa iyong pag-aaral. Focus.
Kailangan mo yan. Kaya nararapat na komportable
at tahimik na lugar ang iyong kalalagyan.
Wag ring kalilimutang ipahinga ang utak.
Find time to relax upang handa ka muling mag-aral kinabukasan.
At iyan ang ating amazing tips, kaibigan.
Kahit new normal, tuloy pa rin ang pag-aaral.
Isang paalala mula sa Science Learning Area at ng himpilang ito.
It's Science Time! You're listening to Teacher Rio.
We're back! Let's continue the discussion on the 3 Mendelian principles of heredity. Can you enumerate them?
The 3 Mendelian principles of heredity are the law of dominance, the law of segregation, and the law of independent assortment.
Very good! What does the law of dominance tell us?
Ma'am, law of dominance states that in every organism, there is a pair of factors or genes which control the appearance of a particular trait. One of the pair of genes or alleles may hide or prevent the appearance of the other.
Well said answer. The factors or genes are the alleles. Alleles can be dominant or recessive. The dominant traits hide or mask the appearance of the recessive trait. The dominant trait is represented by a capital letter and a small letter for the recessive trait, which is used to represent the trait. You will learn more about representing traits using capital and small letters during the live streaming that will follow after our radio broadcast instruction. Let's now have the law of segregation. What does the law tell us?
Ma'am, the law segregation states that all pairs of genes for all the traits of an organism segregate or separate from each other during meiosis or gametes formation.
You are correct. Gregor Mendel argued that for any trait, an organism must inherit one factor from the sperm and one factor from the egg. Thus, a new organism receives one factor for each parent. Lastly, let's proceed to the law of independent assortment. What does the law of independent assortment tell us?
The law of independent assortment states that distribution or assortment of one pair of genes is independent on the distribution of the other pair. Traits are inherited independently of each other. The law applies to genes that are found on separate chromosomes. Thus, one pair of genes is not affected by the other pair.
Very good answer. Aside from Gregor Mendel's study on one pair of genes or alleles, He also studied the inheritance of two pairs of genes or alleles. A cross that involves two pairs of genes or alleles is called Dihybrid Cross. An easy way to do Dihybrid Cross is through the use of the Punnett Square. This is a simple way to determine the possible combinations of genes in a given cross. It can help you predict easily the outcome of a given cross. Do you know who devised the Punnett Square?
Yes, ma'am. Reginald C. Punnett is the one who devised the Punnett Square, ma'am.
Very good! Turn the pages of your learning activity sheets to page 7. How to make a Punnett Square?
Ma'am, to make a Punnett Square, first, make a square and divide into 4 boxes for Monohybrid Cross and 16 boxes for Dihybrid Cross. Second, the letters of the possible genes for a trait from the female are written down on the left side. Third, the letters of the possible genes for the same trait from the male are written across the top of the square. Fourth, start crossing the male gametes with the female gametes in each box until all the 4 boxes are filled, and write the phenotype below each genotype. Lastly, interpret the result.
Let's interpret the given example in your learning activity sheets on page 7. How many offspring will be produced from crossing both hybrid eggshell flowers with alleles capital A, small a, cross with capital A, small a?
There are 4 offspring produced, ma'am.
Exactly. Can you tell me the genotypes of these 4 offsprings?
Ma'am, one offspring has a genotype of 2 capital letter A's, meaning homozygous axial flower. 2 of the offspring have a genotype of 1 capital letter A and 1 small letter a, meaning heterozygous axial flowers, and 1 has a genotype of 2 small letter A's, meaning homozygous terminal flower.
Correct answer. What is the phenotypic ratio of our example?
The phenotypic ratio of our example is 1:2:1, ma'am.
Good answer. Who can tell me the phenotypes of the offspring?
The phenotypes of the offspring are 3 of them are axial flowers and the only one is terminal flower, ma'am.
Very nice answer. And the phenotypic ratio is 3:1. We're done with the lesson, dear learners. Dihybrid Cross will be discussed in our live streaming. I'll check you up if you are keeping the track of the activities today. Let's consider Activity 1. What are we going to do in Activity 1?
Ma'am, Activity 1 is titled Observing Your Traits and Your Family's Traits. We will identify the traits that I, my brother, sister, mother, and my father have by checking the appropriate box. We use a separate sheet of paper for our answers.
Next, turn the pages of your learning activity sheets to page 9. What are you going to do in Activity 2?
Ma'am, Activity 2 titled Monohybrid Cross using the Punnett Square. We read the situation and answer the questions that follow. We use a separate sheet of paper for our answers.
How about Activity 3 on the same page of your learning activity sheets?
Activity 3 titled Dihybrid Cross using the Punnett Square. We show the dihybrid cross of both hybrid heterozygous tall, green mango by filling up the blank boxes in the Punnett Square, and we will answer the questions that follow, ma'am.
Correct! Let's fill in the first row of the Punnett Square. What is the genotype and phenotype of the first 4 offspring of hybrid heterozygous tall, green mango?
Ma'am, when we cross-pollinated the traits in the first box, we get 2 capital T and 2 capital G, which means it is a tall green. Second box, 2 capital T, 1 capital G and small letter G means tall green. The third box is 1 capital T and small t and 2 capital G, which means tall green. And the fourth box, 1 capital T, small letter t, capital G and small letter G, which means tall green.
Very good! For the remaining items, you may answer after this airing, including the rest of the activities in your most convenient time. Do not forget to answer the weekly validating questions attached to your learning activity sheets and give your reflection about the lesson. Somebody has to sum up the lesson now. Yes, my dear.
Genetics is the study of heredity and the factors that affect the transmission of genes. Heredity refers to the transfer of traits of genes from parents to offspring. Genotype refers to the genetic characteristics of an organism, while phenotype refers to the physical characteristics of an organism. Allele is one of a pair of genes that appear at a particular location on a particular chromosome and control the same characteristics. Gene is the basic physical unit of inheritance that pass from parents to offspring and contain the information needed to specific traits, ma'am.
Exactly. What are the 3 Mendelian principles of heredity?
Ma'am, the law of dominance states that in every organism, there is a pair of factors or genes which control the appearance of a particular trait. One of the pair of genes or alleles may hide or prevent the appearance of the other.
Ma'am, the law of segregation states that all pairs of genes for all the traits of an organism segregates or separate from each other during meiosis or gametes formation.
The law of independent assortment states that the distribution or assortment of one pair of genes is independent of the distribution of the other pair. Traits are inherited independently of each other, ma'am.
Exactly. That ends our lesson for this afternoon. We had just discussed the Mendelian genetics. I hope that you have learned a lot from our lesson. I have a nice time spent with you. If you have question or clarification, kindly text or call your Science 8 teacher. That's all for today, and thank you for listening. Back to our radio host, Teacher Dennis U. Mendoza.
Thank you very much, Teacher Ryu Fei, and also to our dear learners for spending another wonderful day with us. I hope your learnings today has made a significant difference in your point of view about Mendelian genetics. I would like to acknowledge the teachers behind this School on the Air lesson. Teacher Riofei Magaway, your radio teacher on the air. Teacher Hector M. Del Rosario, the scriptwriter. Teacher Riza N. Marsan, our technical specialist. Teacher Vicente S. Rodriguez, the language editor. And Teacher Donabel G. Velasco, the content editor. Thank you very much. This is your radio host, Teacher Dennis Mendoza, saying, stay home and follow all health protocols for your safety. Bye! Physics, chemistry, earth science, biology, biochemistry, environmental science. These are some branches of science. Science is about a whole lot more than that. And to sum it up, We believe that science is a way of helping the brain grow in finding new knowledge and help us defeat our curiosity of how the world develops and works today. Science, science, science. This is your class, and this is science.
Dance Radio, silid-aralan sa radyo. Hatid namin magbabago, paraan ang pagtuturo.
Wala nang makakapigil pa. Sulong Arangkada 106.3 Dance Radio sa Aurora, Isabela.
Edukasyo'y susulong, basta na magtulong-tulong. Sulong edukalidad, Dance Radio. Learning is amazing.
Tastes like strawberries on a summer evening, and it sounds just like a song. I want more berries and that summer feeling. It's so wonderful and warm. Breathe me in, breathe me out.
All right, so you've just heard our lesson for quarter 4, week 3, which is about Mendelian Genetics. So I hope our learners are ready for our discussion.
Okay, yes ma'am. So before we start, Ma'am Lynn, so a few reminders lang sa ating mga grade 8 learners. So even though nasa kanilang bahay-bahay na nakikinig sa live discussion ngayon, is importanteng sundin natin yung safety protocols, ano ma'am? So para maiwasan din yung COVID. And syempre, we know that wala tayong complete attendance ngayon ng mga grade 8 learners. So para mabigyan sila ng chance to participate in our live discussion this morning. So all questions will be consolidated and then isasend natin sa kanila ma'am via text or messenger in order for them to magkaroon ng participation dito sa ating live discussion.
Okay, yes sir. Okay.
Ayan.
All right, dear learners, before we start, let's have a simple activity titled Mirror, Mirror. So yan, kuha kayo ng mirror. So you are going to observe yourself by looking at the mirror, then later on list or comment down your unique physical characteristics. So clear yan na. So mag-ready na i-comment sa ating comment box kung anong napapansin ninyo. Unahin natin hair.
Okay, so kung long,
yes ma'am. So
straight,
ang hair ba nila ay straight or curly? Paki-comment naman dyan, mga learners. Straight or curly? O how about you, Ma'am Lynn? Yung hair mo ay
short, straight.
Straight.
Yeah.
May curly hair ba sa atin dito? Wala, no? So
Ay, may sumagot na ma'am.
tayo
Meron,
ay ano.
may mga nag-comment na. Sabi ni Aslin Timoteo, curly. Si John Lester Lopez, mami, straight. Suleika, straight. Asli, curly. Agata, si Mamwad, curly. Ay, karamihan sa kanila, ma'am, kulot.
Yes, ma'am. So, yun yung physical characteristics sa hair po nila. Ito, last one. Yung eyes naman nila. Ano yan? Is it black or brown? Di ba may mga brown eyes?
May
Ang
mga blue nga, ma'am.
gaganda. May blue din. So,
Tayo,
dapat
black.
bawal ang naka-contact lens, ha?
Yes.
Yung natural. Ano ang
Sige.
kulay ng inyong mga mata?
Alright. According to Gerson Marinay, ma'am, brown daw yung kanyang eye color.
Wow, brown
Okay, so
eyes.
mostly brown ang nakikita dito,
Si
ma'am.
Stephanie, black. Si Sen Mercado, brown. Aslin Timoteo, brown. Kit Mamod, brown. Elizabeth, black. Suleika, black. Si John Lester, brown. Ay, marami sa kanila ang brown eyes.
Yes, so ibig sabihin, ma'am, iba-iba sila. So, what is the explanation behind that, Ma'am Rio?
Okay, so lahat tayo, okay, we have individual differences. So, ayan, so makikita niyo sa screen, a quote from Leia Michelle that uniqueness is what makes you the most beautiful. So, kanina, sinabi niyo yung mga characteristics or yung traits na meron kayo na wala sa iba. So, individuals, lahat tayo differ from one another due to the interplay between heredity and the environment. Now, we are all unique. Kayo, our dear learners, you are all unique from one another because you are one of a kind and no other person is exactly like you.
Yes, that's right, Ma'am Rio. So we should respect the individual differences between sa lahat ng tao. Kasi nga sabi nga nila, ang uniqueness na ito, yun yung nagiging it makes you the most beautiful, ika nga. Ayan.
Exactly, Sir Ryan and Ma'am Rio. So lahat ng nabanggit at na-observe ninyong katangian, ang tawag po natin dyan ay phenotype. So ayan sa screen natin, di ba? Magkakaiba sila. May curly hair, may pointed nose, may chinito, ganon. So lahat ng mga katangian na yan ay tinatawag nating phenotype. And it is one of the term that you will encounter and need to understand as we go along our topic. So mamaya, madami pa tayong mapapag-aralan na mga terms na gagamitin natin for today's discussion like genetics, heredity, genes, allele, genotype, phenotype, homozygous, heterozygous, dominant, recessive. So madami tayong matututunan for today. Unlocking of difficulties.
Okay, so yes, so based on the activity of our learners, so Ma'am Rio, we notice, Ma'am Rosel and Sir Hector.
Yes.
Sir
Ryan.
Hector. I miss Sir Hector. Sir Ryan, okay? So we notice that they have different characteristics to each other na kahit na magkakapatid ay hindi pa rin magkakamukha, di ba? So ano nga ba yung mga posibleng dahilan? Bakit kahit na magkakapatid tayo, iisa ang magulang natin, hindi tayo magkakamukha?
Okay, so based on our past lesson,
Week 2.
Nung week 2 bago mag-election, ayan. So mayroong dalawang types of cell division. So napag-aralan natin ang mitosis and meiosis. So mitosis responsible sa regrow or pagpalit or yung pag-heal ng ating mga wounds. Ayun, paglaki natin from a zygote to an adult. Ayan, and while meiosis, on the other hand naman, ito yung nag-ensure na ang tayong mga humans, we have the same number of chromosomes in each generation. So, ayan, meiosis ang responsible sa pag-maintain ng standard chromosome number, which is 46.
And yun nga, Ma'am Rio, that's right. It also allows the genetic variation, which is, yun na kayong sasagot dun sa question ni Ma'am Lynn kanina, bakit di tayo magkakamukha.
Oo, yan.
Ayan. Yan?
Ayun. So, through meiosis, ano?
Yes, Ma'am.
Okay, kaya tayo magkakaiba. So, to further understand, ayan, Ma'am Rosel, ano naman tong, let's study naman yung and discuss yung anong branch ng science ang yan, itong papag-aralan natin ngayong araw.
Yes, that's right, Ma'am Rio. So actually, ngayong fourth quarter, biology yung tinatakal natin na branch ng science. And under biology, so we have what we call genetics. Genetics is the scientific study of heredity and the factors that affect the transmission of genes to determine inherited characters from one generation to the next. So, the study of that is what we call genetics. So, when we say heredity naman, it is the study of how traits. Ano nga ba yung traits sa Tagalog, Ma'am Lynn? Ano ang trait?
Katangian?
Yes, that's right, Ma'am. So, ibig sabihin, heredity is study kung paano naipapasa yung mga katangian, both physical and also behavioral. Paano yun naipapasa from parent to offspring or sa mga anak. So yan ang mahalagang pag-aaralan natin for today. Sir Ryan, paano nga ba nagsimula ang pag-aaral tungkol sa genetics?
Okay, yes, Ma'am Rosel. So the scientific study of heredity started with experiments of Gregor Johann Mendel. So Gregor Mendel is Austrian monk who loves both science and math and considered as father of genetics. Why? It is because he introduced heredity as the biological process which is responsible for the transmission of traits from one generation to another generation. Ayan.
Yes, exactly. Ma'am Lynn, where does Gregor Johann Mendel experiment started? Saan to nagsimula?
Okay, so lahat yan, nag-umpisa yan with the garden peas. So, Gregor Mendel bred different varieties of garden peas and cross-pollinated flowers that had different forms of traits. Okay, so, Ma'am Rosel, pwede bang pakibigyan mo pa kami ng...
Gutom na ako.
Can you tell what is all about that garden pea?
Sure, ma'am. So, ito, garden pea, siguro yung mga learners natin, nakikita na nila ito, hindi lang siguro sila aware kung ano yung pangalan talaga niya. So,
Nauulam na nila
Yes,
yan, ma'am.
nauulam
Hindi lang
yan,
nila
ma'am.
alam ang pangalan.
Okay, so for the information of everybody, when we say garden pea, it has a scientific name of Pisum sativum, or known as, ito, mas familiar sila dito, Gisantes or Sitsaro. So ayan, siguro alam na nung iba. As its local name, and it is prominent ingredient or sahog to some of Filipino dishes because the seeds of a garden pea is a good source of protein and dietary fibers. So, napaka-importante niyan sa ating diet. So, that's why garden pea is also very important to include in our diet. It is one of the most important plant in history of science. So, hindi lang siya good for the food. Ano din siya, kumbaga, historical plant din siya because Mendel used this plant as a subject in studying genetics.
Okay, so, ganun.
Wow, ayan. Wow. Nakakagutom yung nakikita sa
Yes.
screen, ano? Actually, masarap yung, ano na yan, garden pea. Now, ganyan pala ka-special itong kind of plant na ito, Ma'am Rosel.
That's right, Ma'am Rio. But Sir Ryan, I have a question and you need to answer this. Except for the above-mentioned characteristics of a garden pea, what else made garden pea as an ideal subject in the study of genetics?
Okay, that's right, Ma'am Marcel. So, garden pea is an ideal subject in the study of genetics because meron siyang 4 na katangian pa, no? So, unang-una sa lahat, yung presence of observable traits with contrasting forms. So, ibig sabihin, marami tayong ma-observe na characteristics like phenotype nga ng mga learners kanina, no? Yung, for example, yung yellow seed, ayan, yung sa round seed, meron siyang yellow din. Yung pod shape niya is inflated, pod color, and etc. And contrasting forms naman mga teachers kasi pag sinabi nating round, may kabaliktad siya na katangian ng round. Ibig sabihin, pwede siyang maging wrinkled.
Yes.
Yung yellow, green naman siya. And for example, yung last na lang is tall, meron din tayong contrast niya is yung dwarf. Ayan. And next is produces many offspring in one cross. So makikita nga natin pag namunga ang garden peas, marami siyang mga
Yes,
buto.
marami.
So imagine na lang natin pag namunga yan ng mga hundreds pa times 5, o di ang dami ng offspring niya na maproproduce. And short life cycle kasi nga ma'am, si Gregor Mendel, kinonsider niya rin yung lifespan ng isang halaman. Yung hindi niya naantay ng napakatagal.
Yes.
2 to 3 months, pwede na siyang mag-ani. Ayan.
Yes.
So, ang bilis lang. And is in manipulating pollination. So, ibig sabihin, it contains both male and reproductive organs na hindi niya na kailangan ng ibang other garden pea para mamunga. Ano ma'am?
Ayan o, yung nakikita natin sa screen kung paano niya ginagawa.
Yes, ma'am. Ayan, so going back to the experiment of Gregor Mendel, Ma'am Lynn, so ano nga ba yung mga step or yung mga proseso na ginawa niya?
Okay, so Mendel conducted his experiments on garden peas using 3 steps. May 3. First, that is the production of pure breeding strains of pea plants. So Gregor Mendel produced pure breed by self-pollination or self-fertilization, which is one of the characteristics of the pea plant. So once pea plant produce offspring through self-pollination, it will show the 7 traits that mentioned by Sir Ryan while ago. So this pure breed plant pass some phenotypic traits or observable traits like the seed color and the height in many generations. So that's the first step.
Yes, so that's right, Ma'am Lynn. So after Mendel produced pure breed, he crossed two different varieties of pure breeding strains or pea plant with contrasting traits. So ibig sabihin, yung dalawang pure pea plant na may purong lahi, na may magkaibang katangian, ay pinag-cross-pollinate niya ito. So, okay. Ayan. Okay. So, ang tawag natin sa generation ng dalawang pure breed plant or pure breed parent ay parental or P1 generations. Okay, so this offspring or first filial generation, ayan, nakikita nyo sa screen natin, also known as hybrid or sa Tagalog ay mestizo. So ito ay maihahalin tulad nga natin pag ang isang tao or ibang organismo ay nahaluan ng ibang lahi. Okay, sa tao man yan, sa hayop o sa halaman.
All right, Ma'am Rio. So after Mendel crossed the two pure breed parent plant, that resulted a heterozygous offspring, which is called the first filial generation or F1 generation. He crossed it again. So hindi pa nakontento si Mendel, nag-experiment pa siya further. He crossed it again through the process of self-pollination that resulted to another set of offspring. At yun na ay tinatawag na ngayong F2 generation or second filial generation. Sir Ryan, by observing the picture, what can you say about the filial 2 generation?
Oh, yes, ma'am. So, that's right, Ma'am Rosel. So, yun nga, sabi mo kanina, hindi na kontento si Gregor Mendel, ano? At na-curious siya lalo nung may mga traits na lumabas doon sa hybrid natin, na hybrid na pinag-cross-pollinate niya. May lumabas kasi na, for example, sa seed shape, round pa din, and then merong wrinkled. Ayan. So, sa seed color naman, may yellow and then may green. So, na-curious siya. And dyan lumabas na may mga traits sa F2 generation na ma-observe galing dun sa pure breed plant na una niyang pinag-cross. Ayan. Okay? So, ito na nga yung mga outcomes ng mga pinag-cross ni tawag ito, Gregor Mendel.
Sa filial 2. Yes,
yes,
sir.
Filial generation. Sa second.
Yes. So, mag-take tayo ng example dito, ano, sir? Sa seed shape. Sa seed shape, during the filial 2, meron na siyang napansin na wrinkled. Hindi na lang siya puro round na gaya sa filial 1.
Yes.
And then sa seed color naman, hindi na lang din siya puro green. Meron na din siyang na-observe na yellow. So, yun yung result ng filial 2 generation.
Yes, that's right, Ma'am Rosel. So, based on the outcomes of Mendel's experiment, he proposed the following laws that led to the formation of what is known as Mendelian Principles of Genetics. So, but before that, ma'am, pwede ba nating tanungin yung mga learners natin if they really listened in our RBI lesson? Ano?
Yes.
Ano nga ba yung tatlong Mendelian Principle of
so,
Genetics?
Our dear learners, so kindly key in your answers in the chat box. What are the 3 Mendelian Principles of Genetics? Okay, tingnan natin kung may mga nakasagot na. So, the 3 Mendelian Principle of Genetics, please comment or kindly key in your answer in the chat box. Nakikinig pa, andyan pa ang ating mga learners, di ba? Okay, so meron na ba?
Okay, tatlo to, di ba, Ma'am Lynn?
Yes.
Tatlo itong
Ito
principles.
meron. Kay
Meron
Ashley
na,
Timoteo.
bilis.
Law of Dominance, Law of Segregation, and Law of Independent Assortment. Okay, yan kay Ashley Timoteo. Si Aslin naman. Ganun din, law of dominance, law of segregation, and law of independent assortment. Okay, meron pa ba?
Yun, kay Arian Faye Carnate, law of dominance, law of segregation, and law of independent assortment, which are
Correct. Ganun
So,
din
ang
yung
mga sagot
may
nila
mga
ay
sumagot
tama.
pang iba, ma'am, na tama ang kanilang mga sagot. So, learners, hindi na namin mababasa lahat. But thank you very much for your participation. Ibig sabihin, nakinig silang mabuti kanina sa ating RBI.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so very good learners. So before we discuss the Mendelian principles of genetics, there is called what we call rule of unit factors in pair. So the genetic characters are controlled by unit factors that exist in pairs in individual organisms. So ano nga ba yung tinatawag nating genes? So ipakita natin, Sir Ryan. So kapag sinabi nating genes, that is the section of chromosome that code for traits. So sa loob ng genes, nandoon yung traits, na kung saan yung trait, yun yung ipapasa ng parent to offspring na mga katangian.
Yes, that's right.
Okay? So the different form of genes are now called alleles.
Okay, that's right, Ma'am Rosel. And let's move on to principle of dominance. So the dominant allele or trait, so ito na yung katangian, is expressed and the recessive allele can be hidden. So unang-una lang sa lahat, ano nga ba ang allele? So allele in one of a pair of genes that appear at a particular location on a particular chromosome and control the same characteristics. So ito rin yung parang representation or nagko-control or ito yung nagko-code ng mga traits natin. And meron tayong dalawang uri ng allele. So dominant allele is a form of gene that is fully expressed when two different alleles are present. So ibig sabihin, ma'am, ito yung dominante or ito yung nangingibabaw na traits or ito yung na-observe talaga natin sa isang individual. Pag recessive allele naman is a form of gene that is not expressed when paired with a dominant allele. So, nandun pa rin siya sa isang individual, pero yun nga, ma'am, natatakpan siya or nadodominate kasi siya ng dominant trait. So, naitatago siya.
Okay, yes.
Ayan. Okay. So, in the study of genetics, symbols are used to represent individuals. So, ang dominant allele ay represented by capital letters, ayan, and recessive allele by small letters. So, we have here an example, ma'am. Seed color ito, ano? So, ang dominant dito is yung yellow and yung recessive is yung green seed. So, pag pinagsama natin sila, by applying the law of dominance, ano kaya yung lalabas na trait? So, makikita natin, ma'am, yellow seed kasi ito yung dominant.
Although andun pa rin yung recessive, pero namas siya ng dominant.
Yes. So, paano nangyari yon? Yung pinagsama lang natin yung allele na capital Y and small letter Y. So, yun yung magiging genotype natin, ma'am. Okay? And yung ano naman yung characteristics na makikita na natin sa isang individual, ito na yung phenotype or from the word physical. Ayan. So, para hindi malito yung ating mga learners. So, ano ba to? So, genotype refers to the genetic characteristics of an organisms, while phenotype naman refers to the physical characteristics of an organisms tulad ng mga minention nyo na unique
curly
characteristics
hair,
nyo.
ganon.
Yes, ma'am.
Straight hair, those are examples of phenotype.
So yun yung tatandaan nila, no? Sir Ryan, yung difference ng genotype at phenotype. Letter P, phenotype, physical.
Yes.
Genotype, genetic
Genetic.
characteristics. Okay, so speaking of genotype, there are 3 types. So these are homozygous dominant. So if it carries 2 copies of the same dominant allele, homo means the same, okay? And ito pa, homozygous recessive naman, ayan, if it carries 2 copies of the same recessive allele. And lastly, itong heterozygous, hetero means different, which means that an organism has 2 different alleles of genes. So sa example natin kanina, capital letter Y, small letter Y, ano yan, Sir Ryan?
Heterozygous. Ayan. So, yan yung example natin kanina. So, ibig sabihin, ma'am, ang genotype niya is heterozygous lang kasi they are different.
So, all right. So, before we continue, let's try to predict the outcome of our example. Ayan, nasa screen na natin, our dear learners. So, what will be the phenotype and genotype if we cross block, okay, which yung symbol niya is capital letter W, ayan. And white naman yung, ayan, small letter, small W.
Ayan. So ano kaya yung magiging genotype, ano ma'am, yung genetic characteristics ng guinea pigs na yan. At yung phenotype naman, ano na yung magiging kulay. Okay.
Ano kaya ang lilitaw? Black,
black ba or white?
Okay, by dear
Yes,
learners,
okay.
paki-comment daw ng inyong sagot. So ano kaya pag pinag-cross natin yan, dalawang yan, ano kaya ang magiging resulta? Ano kaya ang lilitaw? Magiging offspring? Yung black ba or white?
So,
Okay?
i-base nyo yung sagot ninyo sa Mendelian principle, which is yung principle of dominance.
So doon sa example natin, alin ang dominant dyan?
So yung black ma'am,
Black.
yun
Yes,
yung
yung malaki.
dominant.
That's why capital letter
Yes,
siya.
at yung white, that is the recessive.
Recessive.
Okay, meron na bang nag-comment sa atin? Tingnan natin. So, may nagsasabi, may black. Yes, si Gerson, ang sabi niya, black. Then, yung iba, may nagsabi din, black po. Sabi naman ni Lester, Elizabeth, black.
So yung comment nila, ma'am, yun yung phenotype.
Yeah.
Black.
Oh,
How
si
about the
TJ
genotype?
Black. Ano yung genotype naman? That's the phenotype. So that is correct.
That is correct, ma'am.
Yun.
Correct.
Yes.
Black. Ngayon, ma'am, ang isa naman na is ipopredict nila is ano yung magiging genotype.
Pakita mo nga yung sample kanina, sir.
Meron nagsagot,
Yeah.
sir. Ayan, very good siya. Si Aslyn Timoteo. So, sabi niya, genotype, small letter W, capital letter W, and ang phenotype niya is black. So, tama ba yun, Sir Ryan?
Okay, so tignan natin, ma'am. Okay, very good. That's right.
Ayan, correct.
Nauna lang yung niya, sir, di ba? Ang tamang pagsulat doon is mauna yung capital
Capital letter mo.
Yung dominant dapat.
Yes.
Yun sa mga learners, pag nagsulat tayo ng genotype, mauuna muna yung capital letter, yung dominant.
Ayan, so
Okay?
nasusundan na ng mga
Anyway,
learners. Yes,
tama
ma'am, tama pa rin.
Tama siya, okay.
Yes.
Alright.
Okay, so actually, principle of dominance is evident in Gregor Mendel's experiment, Ma'am Rio. So when Gregor Mendel crossed pea plant with dominant traits into pea plant with recessive traits, all dominant traits are being expressed and the recessive traits are hidden. So noon pa man sa experiment pa lang ni Gregor Mendel ay na-observe na niya yan. Nakita na niya yan. So, say for example, yung eto sa seed shape tayo. So, yung parents niya is round and wrinkled. So, since ang dominant na trait doon ay round, ang kanyang first filial generation ay round din. And another example, sa seed color, green and yellow. Ang dominant trait naman doon ay green. Kaya yung naging first filial generation ay ang dominant
yellow.
trait doon ay yellow. Kaya ang first filial generation ay yellow din. So even before, it's very clear na na-observe na din yun ni Gregor Mendel.
Okay, that's right, Ma'am Rosel and Ma'am Lynn. So ano nga ba yung susunod na principle na i-discuss natin?
Okay, so the next is the law of segregation. And the law of segregation states that during the production of gametes, two copies of its hereditary factor segregate.
Yes,
no?
ma'am.
So maghiwalay. So that offspring acquire one factor from its parent. In other words, allele, or that is the alternative form of the gene, so pair segregates during the formation of gamete and reunite randomly during fertilization. So this is also known as Mendel's third law of inheritance.
Yes, ma'am. So, ang law of segregation ngayon, ma'am, ay nangyayari during gametogenesis or yung gametes formation. So, kung makikita natin, napakasimple lang yung illustration natin na yung isang parent, which is yung meron siyang seed color na allele, na ipapasa niya to sa mga 4 daughter cells niya or yung sa mga offspring niya. Ayan, tagi-isang trait lang bawat isa. So, ibig sabihin, ma'am, walang nadodoble. So, ibig sabihin, sa mga possible offspring niya, dalawa doon, ay maging dominant, ang mabibigyan niya ng dominant trait, yung isa naman ay recessive. Ayan. So pag naglaon nga ma'am, 'di ba, meron tayong yung green peas ni Gregor Mendel. So for example, ito yung mga parent natin ma'am na nag-undergo ng gametogenesis. So yung yellow ma'am, yung offspring niya, pinasahan niya ng yellow na traits which is dominant. And yung green naman, yun naman yung recessive. So pag fertilize or nag-meet yung dalawang yan, so makakabuo na tayo ng offspring which is heterozygous yellow seed na siya. Kasi alam naman natin, principle of dominance, apply natin. Yellow is the dominant. So yun yung makikita natin as physical or observable traits. Ayan. So how about the last, Ma'am Rio, which is the law of independent assortment?
Yes, Sir Ryan. Okay, ang Mendel extended his experiments to examine the inheritance of two characters simultaneously. So, such a cross involving two pairs of contrasting traits, ayan, is known as Dihybrid Cross. Ito, for example, Mendel cross pea plants yielding yellow-colored and round-shaped seeds with plants yielding green-colored and wrinkled-shaped seeds. So, yan yung nakikita nila dyan, ano? Sa
Yes.
screen nila, Sir Ryan.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
lahat po ng F1 offspring, okay, yielded yellow-colored and round-shaped seeds. So, when the F1 individuals were self-crossed, 4 types of offspring were produced in the following proportions. So, out of 16, 9 po ang lumabas na yellow and round. 3 ang green and round. 3 din po ang yellow and wrinkled. 1 sa green and wrinkled. So, this 9:3:3:1 ratio is known as the Dihybrid Ratio.
Yes, that's right, Ma'am Rio. So, gaya ng law of segregation, ma'am, dito kasi, doon sa law of segregation, yung example natin doon, or yung experiment ni Gregor Mendel is hybrid lang, ano. Pero this time naman, ma'am, dihybrid siya. So, ibig sabihin, may mga 4 tayong characteristics na ma-observe natin doon sa dalawang purebred strains. For example, yung yellow niya is round din siya at the same time. And yung recessive naman niya, ma'am, na isang purebred is green siya and wrinkled. So, ibig sabihin, sa law of independent assortment, mag-a-assort itong mga characteristics na ito, maghiwa-hiwalay sila from each other, and then eventually, magkakaroon ng mix-up ng mga traits na ito. So, ibig sabihin, hindi lang ang yellow ang round, hindi lang ang green ay wrinkled. So, pwedeng mangyari, ito na yung F2 generation niya, pwedeng may round na yellow pa rin, may round na green na din, ma'am. At the same time, meron na ding yellow na wrinkled and green na wrinkled pa rin.
Yes.
So, sabi nga na, ma'am, genes for the different traits assort independent of each other during gamete formation. So, 50% or makikita lahat natin ng mga traits na yan sa mga offspring ng F2 generation in a dihybrid cross. Ayan. Okay, so this time, Ma'am Rosel, Ma'am Lynn, meron bang way ang mga scientists kung paano i-predict ang mga possible outcomes pag pinag-cross pollinate or pinag-crossbreed natin ang dalawang organism?
Yes, Sir Ryan, meron. So, actually, scientists use a tool. Meron silang tool to make a prediction in genetics. And that tool is the Punnett Square. So, a Punnett Square, that is a helpful tool that helps to predict the variation and probabilities that can come from crossbreeding. So this includes predicting crossing plants, animals, even humans with each other. So a Punnett Square shows probability, not actual result. Ba? So like in mathematics, so it is a measurement tool that calculates the chance or likelihood of occurrence of an event or traits if we are talking in genetics. So in other words, we can also calculate the possible traits or the possible result if we cross two organisms. Okay, Ma'am Rosel, paano ba natin gamitin itong Punnett Square?
Yes, Ma'am Lynn. So, how a Punnett Square works? So, magbigay tayo ng example natin dito. Okay, so sa mga learners, makinig mabuti. We are going to use heterozygous female and a homozygous male. So, let's consider the traits of tall seen as dominant trait and short as recessive trait. Ibig sabihin, tall, capital letter siya yung dominant. So, a father has homozygous recessive for both traits. So, si father, ang kanyang ay...
Genotypes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ang kanyang genotype ay small letter T, both homozygous. Recessive, homozygous recessive. While the mother is heterozygous for the trait of tall height. So, heterozygous ibig sabihin meron siyang capital letter T and small letter t. Now, we are going to predict the potential genotype and phenotype for the offspring they can have. So, ipakita natin, Sir Ryan. Ayan, so, Punnett Square nga, di ba? So, we are going to use 4 boxes.
Yes, 2 by 2.
Yes.
Ayan. So, Ma'am Rio, paano nga ba ginagawa tong first step sa paggawa ng Punnett Square?
Okay, so dear learners, pwede nyo nang kopyahin yan, yung example dyan sa screen. So, dyan natin isusulat yung mga letters that represent the parents. So, because the female parent is heterozygous, okay, female yung y-axis, tama?
Yes.
Nandito sa may vertical. That's the side. Okay? Nasa side ng square. Okay po? We will be using 1 capital letter and 1 lowercase letter.
Okay.
Female.
Yes, basta dun sa female, ma'am, since meron siyang homozygous dominant, ilalagay natin 2 letter T na magkasunod. Yes, ma'am. And yun nga, sabi ni Ma'am Rio, dun naman sa male, ilalagay natin yung homozygous recessive na male naman, which is yung 2 letter small, yung lowercase letter T.
Lowercase or small letter T.
Yes. Ayan. So, pag nalagay na natin dyan, so, now let's try to carry each other over from the either or the top or the other side until we have 2 letters in 1 box. So, this creates our predicted results. So, ang mangyayari, ma'am, i-cross lang natin, pagsasamahin lang natin yung T, yung capital letter T dun sa small letter T.
Yes.
And ang result niya is capital letter T and small letter.
Pag binasa mo yan,
genotype yan, sir.
Yes,
yung
ito yung mga
letters na yan.
genotype.
Genotype ang tawag dyan.
Okay, next, ito naman from this side.
Yes.
Ayan yung magiging result.
Ganun din.
Yes,
Oo,
ma'am.
pareho lang.
So, ganun lang din dun sa susunod.
2 naman na small letter T. Recessive.
So, ma'am, explain nga natin kung ano yung mga naging result
Resulta,
ng
sige.
ating Punnett Square. Ma'am Lynn, ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng dalawang na lagyan ng circle?
So this represent a heterozygous combination, meaning that there is 1 dominant allele and 1 recessive allele. Remember that a dominant trait will always mask a recessive trait. So while you may have its allele, it will be the dominant trait that you will see. So therefore, in that case, you will see that tall height even though there is an allele containing short height. So dominant she tall.
Yes. So ibig sabihin yung dalawang possible offspring na yan, matatangkad sila.
Yes,
Ayan,
matatangkad.
matatangkad sila, ma'am. Okay. Yes, next, Ma'am Rosel, ano bang ibig sabihin ng dalawang na circle?
Yes, sir. So, ang ibig sabihin naman yan, since lowercase letters represents the recessive trait, kasi sabi nga natin kanina, 2 small letters, recessive po yun. So, since they are the same, they are now called homozygous recessive. We know that they will usually be hidden by other dominant traits. However, because both alleles are recessive, since nag-combine naman yung dalawang recessive, nothing will mask either recessive alleles. Therefore, the height will appear as short.
Yes. So, dyan na nga, ma'am. For example, ma'am, yung sa Mendel's experiment, yung sa F2 generation, kung mapapansin natin, meron na ding lumabas na recessive. Yang alam natin, pag ang recessive, hindi yan lalabas unless wala nang dominant allele na magmamas sa kanya. So at this point kasi ma'am, as in wala nang dominant puro recessive na. So hindi tayo magtataka kung bakit ba't ganyan yung naging offspring niya. May matatangkad naman ang lahi ng mga mother or father. So that is because ganyan yung explanation ng
Hindi ibig sabihin, sir, na si tatay ay matangkad, si nanay ay matangkad, ang magiging anak ay matangkad.
Yes.
May lilitaw at lilitaw din na short kasi nandun sa lahi yung mga ninuno.
Yes,
Baka
ma'am.
the lolo, the grandparents ay mayroong
lahing short, ma'am.
Oo, kaya doon lilitaw.
Yes, eventually pag nakapangasawa din sila, yung mga anak nila or po nila nang may lahi ding maliit, doon nalalabas yung recessive trait.
Yes, ganun siya.
And ayan Sir Ryan yan, i-explain natin yung kabuuan. Ano nga ba yung result?
Yes. So dito nga ma'am, so pag sinabi nating genotypic ratio, yung nabanggit ni Ma'am Lynn, ito yung genetic characteristics ng mga offspring. So ika-count lang kasi natin, so since we have 4 offspring dito, mapapansin natin dalawa yung heterozygous, which is yung tall, yung dalawang nasa taas. Okay? And yung small naman, yung homozygous recessive, dalawa din. So ibig sabihin ma'am, 2 out of 4 na tall and 2 out of 4 din na tawag dito is short. So ibig sabihin they have genotypic ratio na 2:2 or 50%. Tag-50 sila.
Yes.
Ayan.
50% tall, 50% short.
Yes, ma'am.
So, yan yung probability.
Yes, ma'am. So sa phenotypic ratio naman, ma'am, ganun din, Kasi kung makikita natin doon sa offspring na nasa taas na dalawa, na mamamas niya yung recessive trait. Okay? So dalawa ang genotypes natin na may dominant. So ibig sabihin, yung dalawa na yun ay tall. Samantalang ma'am, doon sa baba naman, lahat sila ay recessive allele. So dalawa yon. So ibig sabihin, dalawa din yung short natin na offspring. So a total of 50-50 din.
Yes.
Or 2:2 ratio.
Yes.
At yan yung kung paano gamitin yung Punnett Square.
Okay, so let's have an activity, Ma'am Rio. Tignan natin
may
kung
time
masunod.
pa, ano?
Yes.
Okay, so eto po ang gagawin natin. Okay. So ito ang gagawin niyo sa Punnett Square, ha? Straight hair is, symbol niya, capital letter C, is dominant to curly hair. Yung curly hair is small letter C. What would be the probability that a child would have curly hair if both parents are heterozygous? Hetero means different, Parehas sila.
Ibig sabihin, ma'am, kapag heterozygous, si mother, meron siyang genotype na capital C and small letter C.
Yes.
Si father, ganun din, heterozygous din siya. So, meron din siyang genotype na capital C at small letter C. So, ang gagawin nyo lang, learners, ay i-cross nyo lang siya. And then, huhulaan nyo or you're going to determine the genotype and phenotype.
Sundin lang nila yung binigay nating example kanina sa tall and short.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I think medyo mahirapan yung
Yes, ma'am.
learners na bigla-bigla. So ibigay nating assignment nila ito, Ma'am
Or
Rosel and Ma'am
Or
Ruth.
pwede sigurong performance
Yes.
task.
Ayan,
Yes.
or
ma'am?
their
task na
performance
nila yan.
task na. Okay, their learners, pakiulit nga yung natin, yung situation or yung kwan natin, Ma'am Rio, para makuha nilang mabuti.
Okay. So, ulitin ko ha. Straight hair is dominant to curly hair. Dominant, ibig sabihin, capital letter C po ang straight hair. Small letter C naman ang curly hair. Now, ano ang probability that a child would have curly hair? So, tinatanong dito yung probability, So, yung ratio.
Yes,
Ganyan dapat yung gawin nila, ma'am, yung nasa
Ayan,
screen
ayan.
natin.
Yes.
If both parents are heterozygous.
So ibig sabihin, they contain one dominant allele and
Yes.
one recessive allele.
Kasi
ma'am? Heterozygous. Ayan. So I think hindi natin may papagawa ng kunyan ma'am, may
Ngayon,
masasagutan nila kasi medyo mahirap din at i-consume yung buong oras natin dito sa ating live discussion. Pero ma'am, may nai-prepare tayong activity.
Yes, that is a handy family tree. Pag sinabi nating family tree, learners, that is a picture that shows members of your family. So it includes information about each person. Okay, so itong gagawin ninyo. Do this activity to create your own family tree. Okay, so note to families, we have been learning about traits at school, di ba? O ngayon, pinag-uusapan natin about traits. Inherited traits are physical characteristics that can be passed down from parent to child or parent to offspring. So this family activity can help your child distinguish between inherited and learned traits. Okay.
So itong activity na to, ma'am, kahit hindi na sila lumabas ng kanilang mga bahay kasi it is a family activity. We can
Nakakaroon na ng collaboration
yes,
doon, sir, sa pamilya na.
Yes, ma'am. And para mas safe din sila.
Yes.
And in this, ma'am, they can showcase their talents. For example, doon sa artwork nila, pwede silang magang artistics, digital poster, drawing, collage, or etc. na gusto nila para maipakita yung activity.
Okay. So then, ano lang nila yung kanilang kamay.
Handprint, ma'am, yes.
Yes, so sa ditong daliri na ito, trait no one else in your family has. So dito sa gitna, trait shared with a brother or sister, then trait shared with a parent, then dito sa pinakamaliit, ano yung trait shared with a
grandparent naman.
O sa kabila naman, word describing your character, then your favorite sport or hobby, your favorite food, and your favorite pet.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
So, pwede itong i-present, di ba? Ayan. At naikuan natin ito sa kanila, so napaghandaan naman nila itong performance at may nag-present ng video, sir.
Yes, ma'am, meron dito.
Yan, that is the Timoteo Handy Family Tree. Ito submitted and presented by Aslin Timoteo and Ashley Timoteo ng 8SPJ.
Considering that we are identical twins, we have observed that most of our traits or physical characteristics are from our father. On the other hand, our outspoken attitude is the same as our mother.
So meron dito, ma'am, from 8 Burgundy, submitted by Rafael Cabal Jr. And so ito rin yung present niya, ma'am. Gaya din nung kila Aslin tsaka kay Ashley. So, I think dito, ma'am, na-trace din ni Rafael kung ano yung mga namana niya sa mga magulang niya, sa ano yung shared characteristics with parents, and ano yung mga learned characteristics, for example, yung mga natututunan or ano yung hilig nila sa family nila.
Yes.
Ayan.
Marami yatang nagbigay ng kanilang ayan, yes, also submitted and presented by Arian Faye Carnate of 8 Copernicus. Ayan, with picture siya, sir.
Yes,
kasi
ma'am.
optional yung picture natin, no? Pero nagawa niya. Also, meron pa, sir. Yan, okay, si Vian Kelly Fonseca ng 8 Burgundy. Meron pa si Jenica Beloria.
Ayan.
Okay, at meron pa, sir, andito, hindi ko na lang naibigay sa iyo na na-PowerPoint natin. May ginawa din si TJ Arimbuyutan ng 8 Copernicus and Sweetel Arenzana also. So, sa mga nakiparticipate, thank you very much, mga anak. Okay? Okay, so, to sum up our discussion this morning, kindly fill the correct term on the blank to complete its statement below.
Yan, so pwede silang tumawag, ano, ma'am?
Pwede kayong tumawag, pwede nilang i-text yung 1, 2, 3 yung mga sagot nila.
Pwede
Okay.
niyong ilagay din sa comment section.
Yes. Ma'am Rio, pakibasa nga yung ating summary.
Okay, so eto po yun So after reading and learning about the lesson, I have known that blank was the father and founder of genetics. Mendel chose common blank plants for the focus of his research because they can be grown easily in large numbers and their reproduction can be manipulated. Mendel followed the inheritance of 7 traits in pea plants, Pisum sativum, He chose traits that had two forms, the dominant traits and the blank traits. He performed his experiment by doing three major steps. Mendel concluded that genes come in pairs and are inherited as definite units. The key principles of Mendelian traits are summed up by three laws: blank, blank, and blank.
Okay, so tingnan natin sa ating chat box. Ma'am, may mga sumagot. Sabi dito ni Sweetel Faith Arensana. Sir Ryan, pakitingnan kung tama ha. Number 1 niya, Gregor John Mendel. Johann Mendel, correct?
Yes, correct, ma'am.
Number 2, garden pea plants.
Correct, ma'am.
Number 3, recessive.
Yes, ma'am.
4,
correct.
the law of dominance.
Yes, ma'am.
5, the law of segregation.
Yes, ma'am.
And 6, the law of independent.
Alright.
Correct ba, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Correct na correct.
congratulations, Swetel. Meron
Ganon
pa.
din ang sagot ni Aryan Faye Carnate, ma'am.
Pareho lang sila.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Ganun din sa si John Lester from 8 Ivory, student ko.
Okay,
And
ganun din
Janelle
si
Salvador.
Janelle Salvador ng 8, Aristotle. Si Cassandra Javier ng 8, Copernicus. Ganun din ang kanilang sagot.
Yes.
Sino
Kit
pa ba?
Ma'am Wad also from 8 SPJ.
Si Nora Rosete ng Aristotle. Stephanie Sario ng 8 Aristotle. Lian Galang, Copernicus. Aslin Timoteo ng 8 SPJ. Yan. Saka si Ashley. Yung kambal. Ito pa ng 8 Ivory. Si Jake. Ganon din ang kanilang sagot. Lahat ay tama. Ibig sabihin, marami silang natutunan ngayon at nakinig talaga sila. Diba? Ito pa si Sarah May Berioso ng 8 Aristotle. Ganon din si TJ Antolin. Marami mga sumasagot, sir.
Yes.
Okay, nakakatuwa, no?
Yes,
na
ma'am.
nakaka-proud sa ating teachers, sa ating pakiramdam na pag ganyan nakikiparticipate sila. Happy tayo dahil yung bang kontento tayo sa pagtuturo na maanuhan natin na may natutunan ang ating mga anak sa mga na-discuss natin. Di ba?
Yes. And this is now the last week for shift 1.
Quarter
Quarter 4.
Science 8.
Science 8. So, ito na ang huli.
Yes, mamimiss natin ang mga grade 8 learners natin,
Yes,
ma'am. Ano?
mamimiss natin sila, di ba? Okay, so yan. So thank you very much our dear learners at we hope marami kayong natutunan. Actually, nagtaka din ako kasi itong sa grade 8 na topic natin ng 4th quarter, ito yung isa sa pinakamahirap talaga.
Yes, ma'am. Risk mastered.
Pero you see naman, nakinis lang mabuti, nakasunod naman ang ating mga learners, di ba?
Yes,
Yan.
ma'am. Kaya sa activity nila na Punnett Square, mag-chat lang kayo, mag-text lang kayo para matulungan namin kayo.
Yes, kung may mga katanungan kayo na medyo nalilito, yes, magtanong kayo sa inyong mga subject. And we, the science teacher, ikon uli natin, i-post natin sa mga GC natin yung kanilang performance.
Yes.
I
Okay,
can also
so
forward the PowerPoint presentation.
even
ano,
this
ma'am?
one, yung summary,
Yung summary.
paki-screenshot nyo yan mga anak at paki-sagutan din ninyo.
yan. So, sa Friday, distribution
Yes.
of modules.
Pero na ibang schedule natin sa pamiting natin, ma'am. Di ba sa pamiting natin, morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Then is
so-
afternoon na siya.
Oh, magiging afternoon. Kasi nga pala, naanuhan natin, meron tayong face-to-face. Hindi tayo makakalabas pala ng morning. Kaya sa hapon tayo magdi-distribute. Okay, dear learners, pakihanda na ang inyong mga outputs.
Last na yan for shift 1, ma'am. Shift 1 quarter.
So, don't forget na ipagsama-samahin yung bawat subject. Huwag halo-halo, lagyan ng pangalan, section, and then subject, at kung anong quarter, para naman mapadali ang pagsusort naming mga teachers ninyo. Thank you.
Yes, so hopefully, Ma'am Lynn, next school year, makikita natin sila face-to-face na.
Yes.
Okay, so that's all for today. Grade 8 learners, thank you very much for supporting our program mula nung first quarter hanggang ngayong fourth quarter. Okay, again, we are the team
Ocho.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Dennis, Sir Jacel. Thank you.
Thank you.
physics, chemistry, earth science, biology, biochemistry, environmental science. These are some branches of science. Science is about a whole lot more than that. And to sum it up, we believe that science is the way of helping the brain grow in finding new knowledge and help us defeat our curiosity and how the world develops and works today. Science. This is your class, and this is science. And now, here is your host for the day. Ito ang 106.3 Dance Radio. Dance Radio.
Prepare yourself.
Ang silid-aralan sa radyo, hatid namin ay makabagong paraan ng pagtuturo at kalaman. Mapaumaga, tanghali o hapon man yan. Ang istasyong magbibigay impormasyon kahit saan man.
Alright, here we go.
106.3 Dance Radio. Doña Aurora National High School, Santa Rita, Aurora, Isabela.
This
106.3 DWDR FM.